The crimson dust of Viridian Prime clung to everything. Kai Thorne's torn uniform, his cracked helmet visor, the jagged crystals that jutted from the canyon walls like broken teeth. Each breath sent fire through his ribs, and the metallic taste of blood filled his mouth. His left leg lay at an unnatural angle, twisted beneath a slab of fallen stone that he lacked the strength to move. The battle had been chaos. Plasma fire lighting up the twilight sky, the screams of men and aliens alike echoing off the crystalline formations that gave this cursed planet its name. Kai remembered the moment everything went wrong, the flanking maneuver that became a slaughter, the retreat that turned into a rout. He'd been covering the withdrawal when the artillery strike hit, bringing down half the canyon wall. Now silence stretched across the battlefield, broken only by the wind whistling through the crystal spires above. The evacuation shuttles were long gone, their engine trails faded from the dual sunset sky. Standard protocol. No one left behind unless retrieval was impossible. In this case, Kai Thorne was officially impossible. He fumbled for his comm unit, with trembling fingers, knowing it was useless but needing to try. The device sparked and died in his palm, fried by the electromagnetic pulse that had preceded the bombardment. Even if it worked, what would he say? That he was alive in a canyon? 50 kilometers behind enemy lines with a compound fracture and internal bleeding? They'd already written his death notice. The twin suns of Viridian Prime were setting, painting the crystal formations in shades of amber and rose. Beautiful, if you could forget that this place was hell. Kai had been fighting on this world for 8 months, ever since humanity discovered the vast mineral wealth buried beneath its crystalline surface. The native Viridians hadn't taken kindly to the mining proposals. Strange how peaceful it seemed now. No weapons fire, no shouted orders, no dying screams. Just the wind and the gentle chiming of crystal formations in the breeze. Kai found himself thinking of Earth, of the small town in Montana where he'd grown up, of his sister Emma who'd begged him not to enlist, of the girl who'd promised to wait for him. Sarah Mitchell, with her auburn hair and green eyes, who worked at the library and dreamed of traveling to places that existed only in books. Fat chance of seeing any of them again. Kai's vision blurred as blood loss took its toll. The canyon walls seemed to shimmer and dance as if the crystals themselves were alive. Maybe they were. Everything on this world defied human understanding. The trees grew downward from cliff faces, their roots drinking from streams of liquid light. The very air hummed with an energy that made Earth's electromagnetic field seem tame by comparison. A sound made him freeze. Footsteps, deliberate and careful, picking their way across the debris field. Human boots made a different sound than Viridian feet, and these were definitely alien. A soft padding with the occasional click of what he'd learned were retractable claws. Kai's hand went instinctively to his sidearm, then fell away. The weapon was somewhere beneath the rubble with his crushed leg, and even if he could reach it, what was the point? If they'd come to finish him off, he lacked the strength to stop them. Better to die with dignity than scramble helplessly in the dust. The footsteps grew closer, measured and cautious. Kai forced his eyes to focus, searching the lengthening shadows for movement. There, a tall figure moving between the crystal spires, silhouetted against the dying light. Female, judging by the graceful way she moved, though with Viridians it was sometimes hard to tell. She was scanning the battlefield with the practiced eye of a hunter, checking bodies for signs of life. When she spotted him, she stopped. Even across 50 meters of rubble, Kai could feel the weight of her gaze. She stood motionless for a long moment, a dark statue against the colorful sky, deciding his fate. Then she began walking toward him. Kai closed his eyes and waited for death. At least it would be quick. Viridians were efficient killers. Better than bleeding out alone in the dark, he supposed. His last thought before unconsciousness claimed him was a fragment of prayer, half remembered from childhood Sunday school. Into your hands I commit my spirit. The footsteps stopped beside him. Through the haze of approaching darkness, he felt, rather than saw her kneel down, expected the quick thrust of blade or the hum of an energy weapon powering up. Instead, gentle fingers touched his throat, checking for a pulse. Senna Vex had killed 17 humans in the past month. Their faces haunted her dreams, young faces mostly, terrified and far from home. But war was war, and her people were fighting for their very existence against an invasion that threatened to strip mine their sacred crystal formations and poison their light streams. This human was different. Broken, helpless, no threat to anyone. Standard protocol demanded she end his suffering quickly, a mercy kill that would spare him the agony of a slow death and prevent any intelligence from falling into enemy hands if he were somehow rescued. But something stayed her hand. Perhaps it was the way he'd closed his eyes when he saw her, accepting death with a dignity she'd rarely witnessed on the battlefield. Or maybe it was simply that she was tired, bone-deep weary of killing, of the endless cycle of violence that had consumed her world. Her patrol wasn't due back for 2 days. What happened in this canyon would remain between her and the crystal song of the wind. Senna knelt beside the wounded soldier, her fingers finding the pulse point on his throat. Weak but steady. His breathing was shallow, labored, but he was definitely alive. Up close, she could see he was young, perhaps 25 standard years, with dark hair matted with blood and dust. His face, despite being streaked with grime and pain, held an innocence that war hadn't quite managed to extinguish. The twin moons of Viridian Prime were rising, bathing the canyon in silver light that made the crystal formations sing with harmonic resonance. The temperature would drop, quickly now, another danger for the injured human. His kind weren't adapted for the radical temperature shifts of her world. Against every instinct of military training, Senna found herself assessing his injuries with a healer's eye rather than a warrior's. The leg was badly broken, trapped beneath fallen stone. Internal bleeding, almost certainly. Dehydration and shock. He needed medical attention far beyond what she could provide with her field kit. But she could keep him alive through the night. Moving carefully, Senna began clearing debris from around his trapped leg. The human stirred at her touch, his eyes fluttering open in confusion. When he saw her face, the elongated features, the silver-flecked skin, the eyes that reflected light like a nocturnal predator's, he tensed, waiting for the killing blow. Shalnith, she whispered, the Viridian word for peace. Her voice was melodic, carrying harmonics that human ears couldn't quite process but somehow understood at a deeper level. Kai's breath caught. The alien warrior was nothing like the propaganda posters. No monstrous features or savage bearing. She was tall and elegant, with high cheekbones and skin that seemed to shimmer in the moonlight. Her armor was organic-looking, grown rather, than forged, and her weapons remained sheathed. Most surprising of all were her eyes, deep violet with flecks of silver, holding an intelligence and compassion that seemed impossible in the enemy. "You're not going to kill me," he said, his voice barely a whisper. She tilted her head, not understanding the words but catching the questioning tone. Slowly, deliberately, she placed her hand over her heart and shook her head. Then she pointed to him and made the same gesture. "No killing. Not tonight." Working together, her strength, his guidance, they managed to free his leg from the rubble. The bone was definitely broken, but at least circulation was returning. Senna produced a medical kit from her pack, its contents clearly designed for Viridian physiology but adaptable enough to help. A biofoam that would stabilize broken bones, a dermal patch that would slow bleeding, a mild pain reliever that worked across species. As she worked, their eyes met frequently. Despite the language barrier, communication flowed between them. Her careful touch asking permission before each treatment, his nods of gratitude and trust. When she had to set the bone, he gripped her free hand so tightly that her knuckles went white, but he didn't cry out. "Kai," he said when the worst of it was over, pressing his hand to his chest. "My name is Kai." "Senna," she replied, mimicking. The gesture, her voice made his name sound like music. "Kai." The temperature continued to drop and she could see him beginning to shiver despite his thermal undergarments. Without hesitation, Senna activated her armor's heating elements and moved closer, sharing her warmth. The act was startlingly intimate. Two enemies huddled together against the alien night. From her pack she produced a ration bar, Viridian field nutrition that glowed faintly blue in the darkness. She broke it in half, offering him the larger portion. Kai hesitated for a moment, then accepted it gratefully. The food tasted like nothing he'd ever experienced, sweet and savory at once with an effervescence that seemed to restore energy at the cellular level. They ate in companionable silence, watching the moons trace their paths across the star-scattered sky. Occasionally, Senna would point to constellations and speak their names in her melodic language, and Kai would respond with their human designations. Neither understood the other's words, but they were beginning to understand each other. As the night deepened, exhaustion claimed them both. Senna maintained her vigil, watching for predators and patrol ships while Kai drifted in and out of fevered sleep. During his lucid moments, he found himself studying her profile in the moonlight. The graceful curve of her neck, the way her hair caught silver highlights, the careful way she monitored his breathing and pulse. Just before dawn, as the crystal formations began to resonate with the approaching sunrise, Kai's fever broke. He woke to find Senna's hand resting lightly on his forehead, her eyes closed in what might have been meditation or simply rest. In that moment, she looked nothing like the enemy. She looked like a woman who had chosen compassion over duty, mercy over military protocol. Their eyes met as the first rays of sun painted the canyon walls in gold and crimson. Something passed between them then, a recognition that transcended species and conflict. They were no longer human and Viridian, soldier and enemy. They were simply two beings who had found each other in the darkness and chosen light. Senna's hand lingered on his face for a moment longer than medical necessity required. Her thumb traced across his cheekbone with surprising tenderness, and Kai felt his breath catch for reasons that had nothing to do with his injuries. The war still raged beyond the canyon walls, but in this hidden sanctuary, peace had taken root. 3 days had passed since Senna had made the choice that would change both their lives. She'd moved Kai to a hidden cave system within the crystal formations, a place her people used as a spiritual retreat, where the resonance of the crystals created a natural healing environment. The cave was warm despite the altitude, heated by geothermal vents that also provided fresh water from underground springs. Kai's condition had stabilized dramatically. The biofoam had done its work on his leg, and the dermal patches had sealed his internal injuries. More importantly, the cave's unique acoustics seemed to accelerate his healing in ways that defied human medical understanding. Senna had tried to explain it through gestures and drawings in the sandy cave floor, but the concept of crystal song healing was too alien for him to fully grasp. What he did understand was that she was risking everything to keep him alive. Each morning, Senna would leave before dawn to check her patrol routes and maintain the illusion of normal duty. She'd return each evening with food, medical supplies, and news of the outside world conveyed through increasingly sophisticated pantomime. The war continued to rage, but their small corner of it had become an oasis of peace. Their communication had evolved far beyond simple gestures. They'd developed a hybrid language of words, touches, and expressions that allowed for surprisingly complex exchanges. Kai had learned that Senna was a scout commander in the Viridian Defense Corps, that she had lost her birth family in the early days of the human invasion, and that she'd never expected to find honor in showing mercy to an enemy. Senna had learned that Kai was from a place called Montana, that he had a sister named Emma who sent him letters filled with pressed flowers, and that he'd been dreaming of home so often that he sometimes woke speaking English words that sounded like poetry in her ears. "Tell me about the light streams," I said on their 4th evening together, his pronunciation of the Viridian word still clumsy but improving. They were sitting by the small fire Senna had built, sharing another of her ration packs while the cave's crystals hummed softly around them. Senna's eyes lit up, literally, as her people's eyes did when they experienced strong emotions. She began to speak in her own language, her hands painting pictures in the air. Through her words and gestures, Kai began to understand that the light streams weren't just energy sources, but something sacred, the lifeblood of the planet itself, carrying information and memory across vast distances. "Your people," she said carefully in broken human standard. "They see metal, stone, We see life, memory, songs of ancestors. The weight of that revelation settled between them. The humans weren't just strip mining mineral resources. They were desecrating the Viridian equivalent of burial grounds, libraries, and temples all at once. I didn't know, Kai whispered, and something in his voice made Senna reach out to touch his face. You know now, she said simply. Their faces were close now, close enough that he could see the silver flecks in her violet eyes shift like constellations, close enough that her breath, sweet with the alien spices she favored, mixed with his own. The cave's crystals seemed to pulse with their heartbeats, creating a symphony of resonance that wrapped around them like a blessing. Senna, he said, her name a prayer on his lips. She understood the question in his voice, the careful respect for boundaries that might exist between their species. In response, she leaned forward and pressed her forehead against his, a Viridian gesture of deep intimacy and trust. Kai, she whispered back, and then her lips found his. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative and wondering. Her mouth was warmer than human lips, and there was a subtle energy transfer that made his nerve endings sing. But the emotion behind it was universal. Desire, affection, and something deeper that neither of them was ready to name. When they broke apart, both were breathing hard. Senna's skin had taken on a subtle luminescence, a physiological response that Kai found breathtakingly beautiful. Her hand remained on his face, thumb tracing the line of his jaw as if memorizing its shape. This is impossible, he said, not pulling away. Many things are impossible, she replied in her melodic accent. War between our peoples, life in crystal caves, hearts that speak across species. But here we are. They spent the next hours talking, softly, sharing stories from their childhood, dreams for the future, and the growing realization that what was happening between them transcended physical attraction. Kai told her about the mountains of Montana, and she described the floating gardens of her home city. He spoke of his sister's laughter, and she shared memories of her mentor's wisdom. As the night deepened, they moved closer together, drawn by warmth and growing intimacy. Senna traced the scars on Kai's hands, some from the recent battle, others from a lifetime of small adventures. Her touch was electric, sending shivers through his nervous system that had nothing to do with the cave's cool air. In my culture, she said softly, touch is sacred. We do not share it lightly. In mine either, he replied, catching her hand and bringing it to his lips. But some things are worth the risk. Their second kiss was deeper, more urgent. Senna's armor seemed to dissolve at her mental command, revealing the luminescent skin beneath. Kai's hands found the graceful curve of her neck, the strong line of her shoulders, marveling at the alien beauty of her form. Are you sure? He asked, his voice rough with desire and concern. I have never been more sure of anything, she replied, and drew him down to the soft nest of blankets she'd prepared. They made love with a tenderness that seemed to heal wounds deeper than flesh. Every touch was a question answered, every kiss, a bridge built between worlds. Senna's skin glowed brighter as their passion increased, turning the cave into a cathedral of soft light. And when they finally collapsed together, spent and breathless, the crystals around them sang with harmonies that sounded like joy. Later, as they lay entwined in the afterglow, Senna traced patterns on Kai's chest with her fingertip. My patrol returns tomorrow, she said quietly. I will have to make a choice. Kai's arms tightened around her. What choice? Whether to return to duty and forget this ever happened, she said, or to risk everything for a future that may not exist. He turned to face her, seeing the uncertainty in her luminous eyes. What does your heart tell you? That some risks are worth taking, she replied. But if I choose you, there will be no going back, for either of us. Outside the cave, the war continued to rage. But inside their sanctuary, two hearts beat as one, and the crystals sang lullabies of hope. The morning brought both paradise and peril. Kai woke to find Senna gone, only a warm depression in the blankets and the lingering scent of her skin to prove the night had been real. Panic seized him until he heard the soft splash of water from deeper in the cave system and realized she was bathing in the thermal pools. He found her there, standing waist-deep in water that glowed with bioluminescent minerals, her silver-flecked skin radiant in the ethereal light. She turned at his approach, no shyness in her movements, and smiled with a warmth that made his heart stutter. "Come," she said, extending her hand. "The water heals." The pool was wonderfully warm, and the mineral content did seem to ease the lingering aches from his injuries. But more than that, it gave them a place to be completely themselves. No uniforms, no weapons, no reminders of the war that raged beyond their sanctuary. They floated together in the glowing water, Senna's luminescence, creating patterns on the cave ceiling like aurora borealis. Her hands explored his body with scientific curiosity and growing desire, mapping the differences between human and Viridian physiology. "Your skin is so warm," she murmured, pressing her palm flat against his chest. "And your heartbeat, so fast, so strong." "Yours sounds like music," he replied, listening to the harmonic resonance that accompanied her pulse. "Everything about you is music." She laughed, a sound like crystal chimes, and pulled him closer. "Then dance with me." They moved together in the warm water, a slow, sensual dance that needed no choreography. Her legs wrapped around his waist as he lifted her, their bodies fitting together with surprising perfection despite their species differences. When she kissed him, the water around them seemed to sparkle with increased luminescence. "I love you," he whispered against her throat, the words escaping before he could stop them. Senna went very still. "What did you say?" He pulled back to look at her, seeing wonder and fear warring in her violet eyes. "I love you. I know it's crazy. I know we've only known each other for days, but—" "Thelandra," she breathed, pressing her forehead to his. "In my language, it means the song of souls joining, what humans call love." "Thelandra," he repeated carefully, and her eyes brightened with tears. "Thelandra, Kai Thorne of Montana," she said formally, as if making a vow. "I love you across all the darkness between stars." They made love again in the glowing pool, with a passion that seemed to resonate through the crystal formations themselves. The cave sang with their union, harmonics building to crescendos that echoed the rhythm of their bodies. Senna's luminescence reached new heights, turning her skin into a living constellation map. Afterward, they floated together in blissful exhaustion, her head on his shoulder as they watched patterns of light play across the cavern ceiling. "My patrol will return today," she said eventually, breaking the peaceful silence. "I know. If I go back, I'll be expected to report everything I've seen and done. They'll know I'm lying if I claim to have found nothing in this sector." Kai's arms tightened around her. "And if you don't go back? Then I become a deserter, hunted by my own people." She lifted her head to look at him. "But if I report you, if I tell them about your survival, they'll extract whatever intelligence they can and then execute me." He finished. "I know." They fell silent, the weight of impossible choices settling between them. Outside their sanctuary, two civilizations were locked in a war that seemed to have no end. Inside, two hearts had found something worth dying for. "There's another option," Senna said slowly. "The deep caves. There are passages that lead to the uninhabited southern continent. We could disappear, together, but Kai—" She turned in his arms, her expression serious. "It would mean giving up everything. Your chance of rescue, your return to Earth, your family. My duty, my people, my whole identity. We'd be exiles, belonging to neither world." He was quiet for a long moment, thinking of Emma's letters, of Sarah Mitchell's green eyes, of the Montana mountains he dreamed of seeing again. Then he looked at Senna, at the woman who had saved his life, who had shown him that love could bloom even in the soil of war, and knew his answer. "Some things are worth more than safety," he said. Some things are worth the risk. Her smile was radiant. Then we run. Tonight, after my patrol has passed through and moved on. I know hidden paths through the crystal forests, places where even Viridian scouts don't venture. They spent the day making preparations, gathering supplies, planning their route, and stealing every moment of intimacy they could. Senna taught Kai basic Viridian phrases he'd need to survive in the wilderness, while he showed her how to use human emergency equipment that might prove useful. But mostly they loved each other with the desperate intensity of those who know their time is measured in hours. Every touch was precious, every kiss a promise they were determined to keep. Senna's skin glowed almost constantly now, as if her body was celebrating their union at the cellular level. As evening approached, she prepared to leave for her final patrol check. The plan was simple. She'd report normal activity, maintain her cover until the patrol moved on, then return to guide Kai through the escape route she'd memorized. I'll be back before the greater moon reaches zenith, she promised, dressed once, more in her warrior's armor but moving with a lover's grace. I'll be here, he replied, though the words carried weight they both understood. If something went wrong, if she was discovered or delayed, this might be their last goodbye. She kissed him one final time, pouring all her love and hope into the contact. Thelandra, my heart. Thelandra, my soul, he replied, and watched her disappear into the crystal maze beyond the cave mouth. The waiting was agony. Kai paced the cave system, checking and rechecking their supplies, listening for sounds of her return or signs of trouble. The greater moon climbed steadily toward its zenith, and still she didn't come. Then he heard it, the distant whine of Viridian aircraft, far too many and far too close. Plasma weapons fire lit up the night sky, and he realized with growing horror that Senna's patrol hadn't just passed through. They'd found evidence of human presence. They were conducting a full-scale search, and Senna was somewhere out there, trying to lead them away from the cave while maintaining her cover. Trying to save him one last time, even if it cost her everything. The plasma fire was getting closer. Through the cave entrance, Kai could see the distinctive blue-white flashes of Viridian weapons cutting through the night, systematically searching every crystal formation in the canyon. Senna had been gone for over an hour past her promised return time, and the fact that enemy forces were conducting a grid search told him everything he needed to know. Something had gone wrong. Against every instinct for self-preservation, Kai left the safety of the cave. His leg was still weak but functional, and he moved as quietly as possible through the crystal maze following the sounds of the search. He found a vantage point on a high ledge and scanned the canyon below with his enhanced night vision gear. There, a cluster of Viridian soldiers gathered around a makeshift command post. And in the center, her hands bound behind her back, was Senna. Even from this distance he could see she'd been injured. Her armor was scorched, and she moved with the careful precision of someone fighting through pain. But she was alive, and that was what mattered. The interrogation was being conducted in rapid Viridian, too fast and complex for Kai's limited vocabulary. But body language needed no translation. The commander, a tall male with the ceremonial markings of high rank, was demanding answers. Senna's responses were defiant, her chin raised in stubborn refusal. They knew she was hiding something. They just didn't know what. Kai's mind raced through possibilities. He could try to create a distraction, draw the search away from Senna's position. He could attempt a rescue, though the odds of success were virtually zero. Or he could surrender himself, trade his life for hers. None of the options ended well for both of them. Then he remembered something Senna had told him about Viridian military protocol. Desertion was punishable by exile or death, but harboring an enemy was considered treason, a crime that extended to one's entire family line. If they discovered what she'd done, it wouldn't just be her life forfeit. The decision made itself. Kai began working his way down toward the command post, using every bit of stealth training he'd ever received. His sidearm was lost with his equipment, but he'd kept a signal flare from his emergency kit. Not much of a weapon, but it would serve his purpose. He got within 50 meters before deliberately triggering a small rock slide, announcing his presence. The Viridian soldiers spun toward the sound, weapons raising, and Kai stepped into the open with his hands clearly visible. "I surrender," he called out in Viridian, the words heavily accented but unmistakable. The reaction was immediate. Plasma, rifles swung to target him, and the commander barked orders. But Kai only had eyes for Senna, seeing the horror and understanding dawn in her luminous gaze. "No," she breathed, the word carrying across the sudden silence. She didn't know. Kai continued in Viridian, walking slowly toward the command post. "Found me. Thought dead. Honor demanded mercy for defeated enemy. No betrayal. No treason. Shalnith." It was a desperate gamble, playing on concepts of warrior honor that might not translate across species. But he could see uncertainty in the commander's posture, a hesitation that suggested the explanation was plausible. "The scout commander should have reported your presence immediately," the commander said, his English surprisingly fluent. "Was going to," Kai replied, switching languages. "Wanted to heal first, to not die from injuries, then report. Honor prisoner, not corpse." Senna was staring at him with a mixture of love and anguish. She understood what he was doing, and why, and it was breaking her heart. "You lie," the commander said flatly. "No, human learns our language so quickly without extensive contact." The game was up. Kai saw it in the alien's eyes, in the way the other soldiers shifted their weapons, but he'd bought time, and time was all he'd hoped for. "You're right," he said simply. "She saved my life, and I fell in love with her. We've spent the last 4 days together, and I regret nothing." The plasma rifles hummed to full charge. The commander's hand moved to his sidearm. Senna made a sound like a wounded animal. And then the night sky erupted with human shuttle engines. The rescue force came in fast and low, having tracked the Viridian energy signatures to this location. Dropships disgorged human soldiers while fighter craft engaged the alien patrol vessels. The canyon became a war zone in seconds, with both sides taking cover behind crystal formations. In the chaos, Kai dove toward Senna's position. A plasma bolt seared the air where he'd been standing, but he reached her just as she broke free of her restraints. Her hands found his face, checking for injuries, tears streaming down her luminous cheeks. "You fool," she sobbed. "Beautiful, brave fool. You came back for me." "Always," he said, pulling her close as weapons fire raged around them. "I'll always come back for you." The human commander's voice cut through the battle noise amplified by suit speakers. "All human personnel prepare for immediate extraction. 30 seconds to dust off." This was it. The moment of final choice. Kai looked at Senna, seeing his own decision reflected in her eyes. They could run, try to reach the deep caves while both sides were distracted by the firefight. Live as exiles, belonging to neither world but having each other, or they could face the consequences of love in a time of war. "Come with me," he said urgently. "To Earth. We'll find a way to make them understand. They'll never accept me." She replied, "I'm the enemy. You're the woman I love," he said. "That's all that matters." The extraction shuttles were lifting off, their engines screaming. The Viridian commander was shouting orders to pursue. In seconds, the window of opportunity would close forever. Senna looked at the departing shuttles, then at her own people regrouping for pursuit. She thought of the light streams and crystal songs of home, of the family she'd already lost to this war, of the duty that had defined her entire life. Then she looked at Kai, at the human who had shown her that love could bloom even in the ashes of conflict. "Telandra," she whispered, and took his hand. They ran together toward the last departing shuttle, plasma fire tracking their movement. The pilot saw them coming, saw a human soldier and an alien warrior running hand in hand through the war-torn night, and held position just long enough. They leaped aboard as the shuttle lifted off, leaving behind everything they'd ever known for a future that remained unwritten. As Viridian Prime fell away beneath them, Kai and Senna held each other close, Two hearts that had chosen love over duty, hope over certainty. The war would continue, but their part in it was finished. They were going home, not to Earth or Viridian, but to wherever they could be together. And in the depths of space, the stars sang lullabies of new beginnings.